and to make needed investments in capital, crucial infrastructure investments that create jobs and build up our city and build up our economy and position us better for a strong and durable recovery. I repeat my expression of gratitude that I have extended to Prime Minister Trudeau and to Premier Ford for their support of our city during the pandemic. And I know that they will continue that support in 2021 to make sure that the 3 million people who call the City of Toronto home will remain healthy and well, and to make sure that Canada's economic engine is ready to roar and to help drive the entire country to a robust recovery. I joined mayors from across Canada yesterday in meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, and we made a strong case there for these investments, and our advocacy will continue. In answer to a question that I posed on behalf of all of the big city mayors, the Prime Minister committed to opening discussions on continued operating budget supports for municipalities in 2021, which we have come to call Safe Restart 2.0. I was very gratified by the Prime Minister's answer and the discussion which followed. This was one in a series of meetings taking place this week involving the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs for Canada, and two of the opposition party leaders, where I continue to make the case for this support needed by Toronto and other cities across the country. And I'm doing the same with the Premier and with provincial ministers as well. I'm going to be relentless on this issue because I know the key to a strong recovery, the key to making sure we finish the fight against COVID-19, and the key to getting as many Canadians and Ontarians and Torontonians vaccinated as possible is strong and supported cities. They are the key foundation point to all of these good things happening across our country in the coming months. And we have to continue at the same time to provide the frontline services that have been needed during the pandemic and of course will be needed after the pandemic. I have worked hard on behalf of Toronto and for that matter all cities in the country to forge strong partnerships with the other governments, and I'm confident we will find ways through this partnership approach to do what is good for Toronto, but also good for other cities and good for Canada. This is the best way to make sure Toronto and all municipalities, rural and urban, from coast to coast to coast, can continue to respond to these unprecedented times and emerge from these times stronger and able to put Canada back in the position it was in and Toronto back in the position they were in at the beginning of the pandemic. Together with my continued efforts to obtain this much needed support, I'll be very focused on ensuring that Toronto and Torontonians experience a strong and sustained and equitable recovery founded, as recoveries always are, on good jobs and on investment and on confidence in our city. When the 21 budget process began, I talked about my commitment to working with Budget Chief Gary Crawford and all of my colleagues on City Council to ensure that the final budget makes new and needed investments in other areas and in parts of the city hardest hit by this virus. At the Executive Committee today, I will be moving to initiate $8 million in additional targeted responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and to its impact on our city. This will help that is going to be directly targeted to those who have been the hardest hit by COVID-19 and who need more extra support at this time. This is above and beyond the extensive work that we already have been doing, and I'm proud of the fact that we have responded as a city at a standard that I think is tops in North America to address the needs of our most vulnerable communities. And this $8 million goes above and beyond that to help to those most in support and to expand and complement the array of programs already in place. Based on the consultation with the city staff, I'm proposing the following new investments comprising the $8 million. First, $3 million for a special youth jobs and training program targeted to underserved COVID-19 hotspot neighborhoods. On top of the youth employment programs already provided for in the 2021 budget, already thousands of jobs, this initiative will provide an additional $3 million to enhance existing youth employment pathways and training initiatives such as Toronto Community Housing's YouthWorks, TCHC's Be Build brand, Entrepreneurship Development Program, the Toronto Youth Job Corps, and the Community Healing Project for Crime Prevention. The goal of this initiative is to help scale up existing youth-focused employment program and placement opportunities and to support youth from the hardest hit neighborhoods of the city. The pandemic has not only affected young people directly, which it has, but it's affected their families in a more general way in these hard-hit areas. And I believe these additional jobs for young people will be good not just for them, but for their families as well. The 2021 edition, if approved, will help around 400 more young people specifically targeted to areas hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, and they will now have access to opportunities for summer jobs and for training provided for by the city. Second, $2 million in additional 2021 support for community-based mental health nonprofits with an emphasis on COVID-19 hotspot neighborhoods. This will allow the city to expand and extend the TO Supports Fund to help community groups and nonprofits in areas of the city hardest hit by COVID-19. This will allow us to quickly provide additional funding to community-based mental health organizations, especially in light of significantly increased challenges that many Torontonians are experiencing with their state of mental health. The funding would go to the following three buckets of organizations that received funding through TO Supports investments already announced. First, community partners who are part of the mental health strategy, which supports a range of vulnerable Torontonians, including those who are Indigenous, Black, and Asian. Second, partners that provide mental health support to frontline workers. And third, support to Black-led and Black-serving organizations to provide culturally appropriate mental health services, often in combination with other supports. Reports received even at our pandemic command table as recently as this morning indicates significantly increased attempts to access support for mental health by people from across the city, and I think this contribution will make a significant difference in our efforts to try and serve those people during the pandemic. Thirdly, $2 million for the expansion of internet's access to underserved communities, and this will be in an attempt to provide that expanded access on an immediate basis. This would build on our Connect TO plan to accelerate and expand internet access to underserved communities and residents more generally across the city. It would allow us to focus on expanding internet access specifically in Toronto community housing. And it will allow for the provision of more robust internet access in dozens of Toronto community housing buildings in 2021 in areas most hardest hit by COVID-19. Fourthly, $1 million in additional funds to promote Main Street businesses. This will be added to other programs already provided for in the cause of supporting our Main Street small businesses and their communities on these main streets across the city, including in the hard-hit hospitality sector. It will help to ensure that when it is time for them to fully reopen, there is a robust marketing campaign to promote Toronto businesses and to build up consumer confidences and make sure that consumer confidence is very much directed to supporting these businesses which have struggled so much during the pandemic. This will be on top of the other economic development initiatives to encourage people when the pandemic subsides to shop locally, dine out, return to in-person work, and to ride transit. And there will be initiatives in all of these respects that will unfold when the time is right. This $8 million in additional investments in youth jobs, mental health supports, lower income internet access, and Main Street businesses are all focused on the areas in the city hardest hit by COVID-19. So I think it will make an even bigger difference in those areas. It will be funded with a special dividend draw from the Toronto Parking Authority, a type of special dividend which has been declared before and which can provide for this one-time special investment in areas such as this during a pandemic crisis. I believe these immediate investments will make a difference in the ongoing fight against COVID-19 and focus on areas where we as a municipal government can make a difference in areas hardest hit. I look forward to today's discussions on the budget and to the discussions at City Council next week, and make sure that we can emerge from those discussions able to continue to move our city forward, protect our city's services, and make needed investments aimed at addressing the terrible toll that has been taken by this pandemic. I'm now happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. As a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up. When we call on you, please unmute yourself. First up, we have Matt Bingley from Global. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mayor. As I'm sure you're aware, several businesses are threatening to open in defiance of the lockdown today. You were just speaking a little bit about the difficulties many are facing, and I'm just wondering what you would tell to those who are not necessarily attached to the organizing group, but are looking at other businesses opening and thinking that they don't have a choice?
I would say first and foremost that I understand the frustration that every business without exception has experienced, not just the frustration, but the pain and the sacrifice. There's just no question that the pandemic has taken a terrible toll on businesses, especially the smaller ones. But I think that accelerating a timetable that is going to be set largely on public health considerations and trying to stop a future closure of those businesses, and at any time, in effect, breaking the law or violating public regulations is never the right way to go. It's not a good role model. It is not a good public health exercise. It is just wrong in every single way, notwithstanding the frustration that I understand. And so I would urge businesses to follow the public health guidelines, knowing we are trying to have a reopening that can happen as quickly as possible, while at the same time keeping people safe and keeping those businesses safe from a further closure down the road. That's what we're trying to do. And I know it's frustrating sometimes. It's frustrating for me, but we're going to continue to try to do that. And we urge people, as most do, to support these initiatives and to support following the rules and following the law.
And just to follow up, to those that do, Chief Pegg spoke a little bit about the enforcement the other day. I'm just wondering if this is widespread, do you feel that that the city is prepared to respond?
Every indication I have is it's not going to be widespread, because while all businesses are frustrated and they've all had to sacrifice, I think they also understand the importance of the rule of law. And more importantly than the rule of law, they understand the importance of continuing to follow the best public health advice we have that is going to stop a future closure from taking place if we work hard to do this one properly and do it in a gradual, staged way. And so enforcement will continue. I don't direct that, but I know they will be continuing their efforts, as they do every day, to make sure that the rules and the law are followed. And I just think it's unfortunate that some people, as much as I understand their point of view and their frustration, feel that they have to go to the length of breaking the law, in effect, to make their point. I don't think they do, but we will carry on with enforcement, and we will carry on to have a staged and hopefully robust recovery, and to help in any way that we can with that.
Thanks, Matt. Next up, we have Courtney Heels from CP24. Go ahead, Courtney.
Good morning, Mayor Tory. My question for you is on the decision on the Scarborough RT by the TTC board yesterday. I'm wondering what your reaction is to the decision by the board, and I'm also wondering, could any provincial or federal money change the plan to revert back to buses for that area after 2023?
I think any fair-minded review of the initiatives we have ongoing with respect to Scarborough Transit would say that we're making unprecedented investments in Scarborough Transit. The timing has been affected to a negative extent by some changes to, for example, the Scarborough subway, and that has made it necessary to have a longer gap than we would have liked between the opening of that subway and the time when we just have to, throw in the towel with respect to the continuing to patch up the SRT. I think that the announcement of yesterday from the federal government provides great hope for the possibility we could use some of that money down the road, when all the parameters are determined, to help build the Scarborough East LRT, the Eglinton East LRT. But I think the decision with respect to the SRT itself and closing it is regrettable, but a honest, necessary one. You just can't keep pouring what would have amounted to hundreds of millions of dollars into an old train system that has outlived its life. In fact, it's lived far beyond its expected life. People know this with respect to an old car they might have. There does come a point, where even if you pour all kinds of money into it that goes beyond good judgment, you just can't keep that car working properly. They get that, and that is the honest decision that has been taken here. And I promise that we are not only going to continue to invest more than ever in Scarborough Transit. Decades of neglect will be reversed by the provincial government, the federal government, and by the city, but that it is going to happen in a way that is going to happen as quickly as possible, but necessitates, unfortunately, the closure of the SRT, because its time has come. And we're going to replace it with the best bus service people have seen. Buses that operate as frequently as every minute, to make sure people can get to where they need to go, accompanied by other measures that we take as the city government to make sure those buses can keep moving.
Thank you. My next question, we're finally starting to see an improvement when it comes to COVID-19 numbers in the city. That being said, the Family Day long weekend is quickly approaching, and Lunar New Year. Do you have concern that people could gather over the next couple of days? And are you aware of any additional enforcement that might happen to ensure that doesn't happen?
The main thing we will focus on is continuing to get the message out to people that they should, as Family Day and Valentine's Day, as with Christmas and New Year's and Easter and Thanksgiving and all the days before that, that fun, yes, on Family Day, hopefully to be outside, notwithstanding the cold weather, but to make sure we follow public health guidelines first and foremost at all times, on all days, no matter what day it is.
Thank you, Courtney. Next up, we have Jennifer Pagliaro from the Toronto Star. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor. I'm wondering about the 8 million that you're moving today, where the funding for that is coming from and how that jives with the staff plan to backstop the lack of operating funds if that money does not come from the other governments.
Well, I think it's separate apart and entirely from that plan B, as it were. Plan A is to get the support from the other governments, and I think the conversation I had with the Prime Minister yesterday was extremely encouraging in that regard. And similar conversations I've had with other federal officials and provincial officials would have me believe that if we keep at it, we're going to get some measure of support from them, and that is the ideal circumstance that we much prefer. The money that is going to finance the $8 million for mental health, for internet, for jobs for young people in the hardest hit areas of COVID-19 is going to come from a special dividend that would be paid by the Toronto Parking Authority. This has been done before. It is a one-time special dividend, and it would go to finance these investments that are to be made during the course of what is hopefully the latter stages of the pandemic. But I'm confident that we have first of all, the efforts being made, led by myself, to convince the other governments to support us again, as they have done in 2020. Secondly, a plan B in the event that that support doesn't come about, which I hope will not be the case. And thirdly, this series of special initiatives that can help neighborhoods hardest hit by COVID-19 in areas like mental health, internet access, jobs, and getting small business going again.
The issue of funding supportive housing came up at Budget Committee. Committee rejected a motion from Councillor Layton to try to include that funding in the budget. I'm wondering, given what we're seeing in the city when it comes to chronic homelessness and increased homelessness as a result of the pandemic, why the city would not look for ways to backstop that funding ourselves, given that the need is urgent.
Well, the need is urgent, and I'm spending my time actually, and I invite others to join me, advocating to the other governments, principally the provincial government. This is where this operating funding should be coming from. It is largely a part of the healthcare system, because the kind of funding we need to operate supportive housing is helping people with mental illness issues, with substance use issues. And I am not in favor of the city stepping forward and filling the shoes of the provincial government. I am for exhausting every single avenue of advocacy to have them accept their proper responsibilities for this supportive housing operating funding, as the federal government has stepped up and done, by the way, with respect to the capital. This is a partnership. The federal government has stepped forward and is going to do more to provide capital to help us establish supportive housing, hundreds and hundreds of units, and I commend them for that. The province has as yet not stepped forward and accepted their share of the responsibility for helping to care for people who have health-related issues, mental health issues, substance use issues. And I am going to be exhausting that avenue and making sure that we get that support from them, which I'm confident we will in the end. And I'll adopt any measure that I have to put forward that advocacy, as I've proven I will do with things like public health and other issues like this. So I think that's where the responsibility lies. Civic taxpayers and civic tax-raising measures simply do not have the capacity to finance social programs. And I think the worst thing we could do is to just say we're going to step into their shoes without having any idea where the money would come from. And it's not supposed to come from the sources available to us at present, which principally, as you know, are property taxes and a bit from the land transfer tax.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next up, we have Natalie Johnson from CTV. Go ahead, Natalie.
Good morning, sir. I'm just wondering, when it comes to vaccine hesitancy, obviously you're directing a lot of effort toward public awareness campaigns. When you look at the numbers related to vaccine hesitancy in some of these communities, are you concerned that the levels stand to impede the progress that could be made, the herd immunity that could be achieved once the vaccine supply is there?
I am very concerned about vaccine hesitancy to the point where I, together with the Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Davila, and Councillor Joe Cressy, initiated a series of measures that were implemented, actually began to be implemented a couple of weeks ago, which included, for example, something unprecedented in Canada, and people are taking note. A Black scientist task force on vaccine, which is not only going to give us advice on how to get around and deal with this, but is going to literally hold town hall meetings under their auspices to inform people and to build trust with people, say in the Black community, which is not the only place where there's vaccine hesitancy, but it is certainly one of the communities where that's prevalent. So we have a job to do, and we've started on it now, before the mass vaccinations even take place, of informing people, reassuring people, giving them the information so that they can follow the advice we're also giving, which is please get vaccinated. It's safe. It's going to protect yourself and your coworkers and your family members. And so we're going to make sure we inform people to help them along the way to becoming comfortable and trusting in that effort.
So does the level of vaccine hesitancy that exists now in some communities actually stand to impede that progress or delay the herd immunity that we could achieve?
I would rather look at the glass as being, mainly full, because while there's a significant number of people who have vaccine hesitancy, the vast majority of people do not. But what we want is to make sure that we get, true and complete herd immunity, including in particular some communities that do not deserve and should not be left to be more vulnerable because of something that we could overcome by building up trust and giving more information. We don't want anybody to be left behind in this vaccination campaign. And so that's why we've begun our efforts quite intensively, I think unprecedented in all of Canada, to reach out to communities where there is vaccine hesitancy. But the majority of people are comfortable with getting a vaccination, and I'm sure they will when the supply is available. But we're going to work very hard to make sure that it's not just the majority, but every Torontonian who is comfortable getting vaccinated when the time comes.
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.